Yo, and welcome to the 52nd and a half episode of Lake of Rage Pokemon Trading Card Game Podcast. That's right, 52nd and a half. We have a bonus episode coming to you, 2 episodes in your feed this week because we are the best Pokemon Trading Card Game podcast and we want to give you as much content as possible. So we have joining us recurring guest. We had you on almost a year ago exactly, actually. I think it was about 40 episodes ago or so. We have the Liverpool regional champion and our 2018 world's champion, Robin Schulz.
Hi, what's up?
So we got a very special episode. We are going to be talking to Robin about the run at Liverpool. So we're going to learn how did he come to deciding to play the deck, as well as, the rest of the Limitless squad deciding to play the deck. A little bit about the day 1, day 2 run, some of the good matchups, some of the stuff you enjoyed. And then, of course, the one that I think we all want is learning a little bit about the deck itself, because we've seen content creators grab the deck and be like, this thing is hard to play, and proceed to the dead draw. And I'm super curious to hear you defend the deck, because I love this thing and I really hope it's good. So
It is good, I would say.
okay, I hope you think it's good. You want a regional. That seems pretty good. So I have to start with the first one. We've already heard the rumors. I assume everyone listening to this has already heard it too. Tord came to you with the deck. Is that true?
Yeah, so personally, for most of the format, the first, I don't know, few weeks, I've been mostly playing meme decks or lesser, something like Pachirisu. That's my favorite deck of the format currently. Pachirisu Orange Crow. I played that in the big online tournament, and yeah, so I haven't really been testing too much of the Arceus and Mew and whatever. But then 2 weeks before Liverpool, our whole group started to test more seriously, I guess, going on Discord almost every night and trying different stuff, playing with each other. And I don't know, one night I just joined and suddenly everyone's just playing Urshifu. And yeah, there's 10 Urshifu lists in chat and everyone's hyped on Urshifu, and I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I guess Todd and the others were building this very weird Urshifu list that was trying to beat Mew with some yoga loop plays with very weird game plans, and yeah, it seemed pretty cool. And I've played a few games against it with Mew in the call, and yeah, it was holding up pretty well. And yeah, since then, all of us were considering playing the deck. It wasn't a super serious deck at first, more a little bit memey as well, but it was doing pretty well. And Pedro was actually the biggest believer. I think he played it a lot, so on the ladder and against the others, and yeah, was testing it a lot. And then by the end of the week before Liverpool, he was kind of set on playing it, and Todd was still he has played Mew so much that and was super confident with Mew, so he just was pretty sure he wanted to play Mew, and us the others were very unsure what to play. And yeah, in the end we just joined Pedro on the Ushi train.
How did Pedro convince you over toward playing Mew? How did what did Pedro say oh, this is definitely the deck that we're going to play?
I think just because the deck is just it looked just really cool, and I personally, I don't really like playing the best deck in format, the deck that everyone's trying to beat. I know that usually, even with people trying to beat the best deck like Mew, they don't really do it. You can still do well with the best deck, even if everyone's trying to beat it. But I personally, I prefer playing a bit more unusual decks that you have actual good matchups where people don't want to play against. I think that's like a bit more fun, and also maybe better. I'm not sure.
So you're telling me you took fun over optimality and it just worked out?
Personally, I'm also not the most experienced Mew player, and I think if you are playing the best deck, you should be very experienced and be very confident in all your matchups because everyone's trying to beat your deck. So you should know how to play it pretty much perfectly. And I wasn't that confident in Mew. Like I've played a decent amount. I think I know most of the game plans, but still, I felt more comfortable playing like something else. And the Urshifu deck was definitely something else. And yeah, so it seemed to have the answers against everything. And even though it's like not the most consistent deck, I think it was a pretty good choice. Yeah, and it ended up working out, of course.
I love that it was a pretty good choice. I would definitely agree with that. It seems to have worked out as well as it could have.
Yeah, like unfortunately, like the others all lost their win at into day 2, but played the deck. Because the deck does have its problems, of course, but yeah, for me it worked out.
So I'm curious, and this is something I always want to ask top players, is how much testing did you do? Because you say like, oh, I didn't play much Mew. Is this like toward level if I didn't play much, where like you've only played 400 or 500 games? Or is this like, I played it twice and I didn't like it?
No, I've played like below 50 games with Mew, I think. I would consider like 50 games to be like definitely like I guess like 10 is like little, and then if you go up to 50, that's usually enough. After like 100 or something, I don't think that like you might still get better at certain matchups or whatever, but you should already feel comfortable with a deck after way less than 100 games, I think.
Okay, that's good advice for me to hear because I'm always curious. You know, you hear toward like, oh, I've been repping this out 12 hours a day for 2 weeks, and it's like I have not done that.
I don't think anyone actually does that. I mean, there are some people, but that's a bit much for sure.
So it's like once you've played a handful of games, you're like, man, this is fine. I've done enough.
Yeah.
How about for Urshifu? How much did you play with this specific build? Or even do you count? I guess, okay, here's the first question is, do you count watching and chatting with your teammates in a Discord call as reps for yourself?
It depends. If I'm very focused on the game that someone else is playing and thinking through all the plays, discussing with them, then yes. But if I'm just like chilling in the call, not like just watching over the games a little bit, then not really. It really depends how focused, and yeah, it's always best to just play the deck yourself because then you actually have to do the actions, and that's also just watching is good and discussing plays, but you should also play the deck yourself. It's pretty important, I think.
And then how much did you actually play this deck yourself?
Honestly, too little. I played a little bit against it, and then I had one one evening where I played. So the main testing I did was just against Mew with the. It was like I don't know, like 5 hours or so, playing against Pedro, and discussing all like he was looking at my hand, discussing all the plays with me. Like, so that was very important, and that like gave me the confidence to play the deck because the new matchup was obviously the most important one. But other than that, I played a few games on the ladder, and yeah, it was doing fine against random decks. So yeah, I decided to go with it. But I didn't play it that much against non-Mew matchups, which I should have. But the thought was just against other decks, you're just an Urshifu deck, you should be fine, just like do whatever. We even like put in the Cheryl because this just makes it even better against everything that's not Mew. And with especially that's the logic, yeah, you try to beat Mew, and then the others you're worse Urshifu deck, but you should still be good enough. And yeah, but I definitely would have liked to have tested some other matchups as well, like looking back at it, because like it worked out in the tournament, but I wasn't prepared nearly as well as I should have.
So I heard the like, oh, you're just still an Urshifu deck against the jank, which is something that I've definitely seen. I was watching Sack's stream, who was our Tuesday guest. We were talking about the Liverpool results, and he's like, this deck isn't hard to play just because he's spamming rapid flow. Because you're like, well, Raihan rapid flow, that kind of stuff. How many games do you actually get to pull out where you're just like, well, I'm just an Urshifu deck and I win because I'm Urshifu? Or like, how many matchups, I guess, would be better than how many games? Versus like, oh, you have to do all these fancy little plays to actually make stuff happen.
Most of my matches and matchups I faced, I played against quite a few Arceus decks, and I played against 2 Mews and 2 Mana Mars. Against those decks, I guess you have to have like specific game plan or something. But against the other, pretty much every other matchups, you just do Urshifu things and hope that's enough.
So let's jump into how the tournament run went, and then we'll get back to the deck, or we'll get there. And I have a million questions, of course, but I want to start with round one. Even if your round one wasn't exciting, first IRL big CP tournament in 2 years. How are you feeling sitting down for round one? What's going through your head? Like, what does it feel like?
It felt just like being at a tournament. It didn't really feel that much different than usual. Just being at a tournament again, and it felt like I felt just like I was back, like back home. I don't know. So like it should be.
So it's just like the old analogy of like, it's like riding a bike you never forget.
Yeah, pretty much like it. It didn't feel like looking back, like the pandemic time definitely felt like a long time, but when I was back at the tournament, it felt like it just nothing changed. Like was like the last tournament was like 2 weeks ago or something.
Was there any rust initially you had to like shake off, or you just like, nope, I got this. I know how to prize check. I've got my sequencing of real life cards down.
The price checking was funny actually, because on Friday after we arrived at the our Airbnb, we didn't really playtest, but what was I haven't really played IRL in basically since tournament stopped, and with the price checking, like we played the deck on PCGO only, and on PCGO price checking is much easier, of course. And with the deck, price checking is pretty important. So we were all like super worried about the price checking part. So on Friday we just like took our decks and was just like setting up and checking prices like for quite a bit, and it was actually better than expected. I expected it to be really hard to price check IRL, especially with all these one-offs, but it turned out to be okay. Like it was easier than expected, so it turned out being alright.
Is this why you play only full art supporters, or is that just a preference of I like full art supporters?
Yeah, the full art supporters definitely help with price checking, but I also would play them anyway because they are nicer. But that's definitely it. I think it's pretty helpful because checking the supporters is really important next to the one of Pokemon, of course.
So can you walk us through some of the stuff that happened on day one? Maybe some of the like better matchups or scarier matchups or things that kind of happened through that first day. So you sat down, you're good to go, and it went pretty well. But like, what are some of the things that happened on that day one?
Day one was quite a struggle for me, actually. I ended up having 4 ties and 5 wins in the end, so barely made it in. With my matchups were okay. I faced 2 Urshifu Melonies, which I considered my worst matchup before the tournament. So that was a bit unfortunate because they can just rapid flow much easier than I do, and the Urshifu Mirrors pretty much just who can rapid flow more. So that was scary, but my opponents in those games didn't draw perfectly. So got away with 1 win and 1 tie there. So that was nice.
Real quick, before going into other ones, you say Urshifu Melanie, and my initial thought is, what? Were you expecting to play the Urshifu mirror at all outside of your teammates?
No, not really. I thought there might be people trying deck, but it just it's not good against Mew, so I wouldn't really expect to play 2 of them.
Okay, cool. Because I hit one Urshifu in Salt Lake City, and I was like, what are you doing here? Like, go to last format. You shouldn't be here right now. So, okay, it's good to know. What else did you hit in that day?
Then I played against 1 Mew, which I won. Which that was actually round 1. Like the kind of the most stressful matchup at the beginning. But yeah, my opponent wasn't very experienced playing against the Moltres deck, so it was like that was fine. And yeah, besides the 2 Melanie Ushifus, my matchups were quite good. I think I actually ended up tying against Gengar, which was a bit unfortunate, but they can actually one kill Urshifu, so it's not like that easy. It's if you stumble a bit, you can pretty easily lose. So, and I also tied against 1 Arceus Inteleon, which should also usually be a win, but yeah, so that was 2 ties that against presumably good matchups, so that was a bit unfortunate. But then in the like last rounds, I faced another Arceus, which I then won, and an Ice Rider. And in my win it in, the last round I needed to win, I actually played against Jolteon. So that was nice.
So these ties that should have been good matchups, I assume, was there a Dunsparce in the Arceus list to at least make it hard?
Like every single Arceus I played against had Dunsparce.
Okay, cool.
I think like everyone at Liverpool played Dunsparce in their deck, which makes sense because you don't want to lose against random fighting stuff like a Stonjourner or
Hariyama.
Zapdos. Yeah, it's like not even just Urshifu decks. There's so many random fighting techs in all kind of decks, so I think you definitely have to play Dunsparce.
Were these ties then like, is this a product of playing the deck for, the first handful of times IRL? Is the deck just a slow deck? Like, why weren't you able to finish the 3 games in time?
I think it's a combination of everything. So first of all, I wasn't very experienced with the deck, so I definitely could have played faster. Also, my opponents were also not very experienced probably playing against it, so they also didn't play that fast. And of course, it's the first IRL tournament back, so it's like maybe people play a bit slower in general. And also the deck is just not the fastest because it's very reactive. Even in like the Arceus matchups, the games can take quite a while. Like for example, against Mew, if they just don't want to take prizes, just Oricorio forever or something, then the game literally never finishes. So it's like if you just play a deck like Mew, that's much nicer for best of 3, where you can just like win in a few turns. Whereas with Urshifu, especially with this Urshifu list, you don't just win. It takes a while. So yeah, that aspect was definitely a bit annoying, and yeah, maybe even like underestimated the 50 minutes a bit, like at this tournament.
So going into day 2, you're 504. How does this feel? Because I'm assuming you've been into day 2 at 621 or higher before, but how does 504 feel? What are you thinking with that record?
Well, I wasn't really expecting to do that well in day 2. After day 1, where I barely got into day 2. So yeah, it didn't feel very convincing, especially with everyone else losing their win and ins, and so I liked the deck. I mean, I didn't lose, and I still felt like I had mostly just good matchups, but yeah, it was not the most convincing of day 2s ever.
Are you the type of person, and I am this type of person, so I have to ask, who goes to PokeStats keeping track of the day 2 decks when you're going into day 2 and is like constantly refreshing and trying to memorize who's got what? You've got it pulled up on your phone ready to go, or you just like, I'll see what happens?
No, and like after day one, I just like went to dinner and was like out for actually quite a while. And then also we had this time shift, time zone, the daylight savings time change. So got like even 1 hour less of sleep. So that was day two was like kind of tough with the amount of sleep and everything. I think a lot of people were struggling with that. Yeah, I didn't really check what. Yeah, it's like on day two, when I got like my pairings, I for most rounds I checked on Pokestats, but that was just right before the round.
So do you think it helped your like experience as a dev and a college student who just like I assume has a very unusual sleep schedule and is used to, lack of sleep? Do you think that helped you in that day too?
Maybe actually, yeah.
Had to ask because I think every computer science person I know or every dev I know is just like some nights you get called to go do maintenance and you just don't sleep that night. Day two. So you have to do very well. You're 504. You barely scraped by. You got to win, presumably 4 to make it to.
Yeah.
And you're well aware of that, I assume, right?
Yes. I think when I'm playing in day two, I'm basically just trying to like go one game at a time, just try to win everything and then see what happens. Not like I stress too much about, oh, I can't lose, I need to win or whatever. It's just play and see.
I feel like that's really good advice for everyone. Like no matter what, day 1, day 2, of just play this round and then worry about it later. So what happened in day 2? Like obviously we know it went pretty well, but heading into those rounds 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Day two went really well, actually. First 2 rounds I played against Arceus decks and ended up winning both of. I don't know if I lost the game, but usually whenever I won a round, it was like a 2-0 because it's just so hard to finish 3 games. Then after those 2 Arceus decks, I played against the Hariyama deck, which was also just a good matchup for Urshifu.
Yeah, do you ever lose that matchup? Or like any single prize, anything without Manaphy?
Well, if I draw really bad, it's possible, but yeah, it's overall it's definitely fine. Like the Hariyama deck didn't even play Manaphy. It wasn't built to beat Urshifu at all. So yeah.
Imagine not teching for Urshifu.
It's a nice thing about playing a kind of unexpected deck, right? Like every round, basically, like especially like in day two, every round my opponent was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna lose," even before the match, and yeah, that's a nice thing if you have that going for you.
Is it like over there like it used to be over here? So in NA, it was always what's DDG playing, what's DDG playing, what's DDG playing. So over there, is it like what's the Limitless crew playing? What are they playing? And like everyone knows your deck after round 1?
I don't know. Actually, I haven't heard much talk about that. But also in day one, I barely seen anything that's going on because I was in timeout almost every round. It's yeah.
All right, so day 2, 2 Arceus decks, a Hariyama deck. Shout out to them for getting top 32 with that. And then round 13? Round 13. What do you hit?
Yeah. Around 13, and I actually played against Todd. This was my second Mew matchup of the tournament, and which of course is scary playing against Todd. But in this round I drew perfectly. Like this was like the best 2 draws of the tournament, and he could do nothing. Like I had everything. I didn't price a single thing basically, and yeah, he basically got destroyed. This was like I drew like I couldn't have drawn better in those games. That was just that was incredible.
This is the matchup I think. Correction. I don't care what everyone else wants. This is the matchup I want to hear because this feels like it would have been a slightly better finals match than I assume the finals match was. I've watched Pedro stream and watched the Malamar matchup, and it looks literally unlosable.
Actually, the finals was not that easy. Also, I kind of messed up in game 1 of the finals, but I got lucky. So yeah. I think the mana matchup is good, but I think Pedro is exaggerating it a little bit.
I mean, that is something he does tend to do. I've definitely heard him say things are auto wins that are just like slightly good matchups. So
Yeah.
when you say you drew perfectly against Mew, what does drawing perfectly like look like?
So like game 1, I won a coin flip, so I got to go second. I had to keep calling immediately, then into the Cynthia, into the Zinnia, into drawing a lot of energies, and it's like I just didn't with anything. I got everything I wanted basically. And like it's important to not price like your Hooper, your Moltres, your boss, your like Medicem, whatever you like need, depending on how the game goes. So yeah, my prices were like I don't know, probably some incense or level boards or whatever. I don't know. And like in the second game, it was pretty much the same. Like where I had to go first, but I opened like triple basic naturally, so I didn't need to keep calling immediately. And I didn't start the 2 pricer, which is really important. So yeah, just went really well.
That's the dream for an Inteleon. Just draw so well you don't have to keep calling is like you feel invincible at that point, right?
Yeah, I might have still used keep calling afterwards. I'm not sure, but I had a lot of basics even going first, which is usually very scary because you can like fall behind quite easily.
And keep calling is one of those attacks where like sometimes even if you have like 2 more Sobbles in hand, you know the third one's in deck. It doesn't hurt to be like, well, I'm gonna go get it and get the energy in the discard for the Raihan play, which actually I don't know if that's probably not the way your matchup goes specifically in this deck, but it never hurts, I assume. So when you say you won the coin flip and got to go second, is that specifically against Mew, or is that just what this deck wants to do?
I went second every single round. Like it's against Mew, it's important because then you basically just get 1 extra turn. But in the deck just doesn't work without keep calling. You always have to use keep calling. So technically I'm supposed to go first against Arceus, at least according to Pedro, but I just went second anyway, because every time I choose to go first, I just open Sobble Energy Pass, and it just feels bad. So yeah, also I think on day 1, I lost all 9 coin flips, but I always got what I wanted. I always got to go second. So that's just playing a going second deck in this format, especially if people don't know you want to go second, it is so nice.
Yeah, did any of your opponents figure it out? Obviously, when you lose the coin flip, that's a little different. But did they ever like lose game 1 and say, "Oh, I should go second to stop that from happening"?
No, I think I got to go second like literally every game of except I guess against Todd, and maybe like in top 8 against Malam, I also had to go first. But other than that, I think I just got to go second every single game.
This is the happiest I've ever heard someone be saying they lost all 9 of their coin flips.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I'm supposed to go first or second against Arceus, but against this matchup I don't particularly care, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely going second deck, and that's a big advantage. Just getting to do that every round.
It sounds amazing because when you play a deck that wants to go first, you're like, oh, I have to get Arceus energy and be going first. It's not a super feels good when you have to go second and don't hit that double turbo energy. So then you're 4-0 on day 2. So you're
Yes,
I can't.
And then I could ID the last round.
904. So you can ID into 905.
Yeah. Yeah, day 2 went like perfectly, pretty much.
Are you looking at the bracket and like planning everything out, or is top 8 still just like, well, I'll beat this person and then I'll play the next round, I'll beat them, and then we'll be good to go? Like, how prepped are you for that top 8?
Yeah, I saw that if I won top 8, I am in the same bracket as Sander with his control deck into top 4. So that was scary.
Is that your worst matchup, you think?
I don't know. I did play it, but it is scary at least. And he played Manaphy, and he had like the Dusk Knot to shut off rapid energies and everything. So I assume it was probably a bad matchup. I don't know, but I don't know if I can beat him, but he lost top 8, so I avoided having to find out, which was nice.
The Dusknoir is definitely something that just always seemed to body Urshifu. Of course, gosh, I mean, what even would you attack? Like, what would, I know this is a complete hypothetical, what would even a game plan look like for you in that?
I don't know, probably like try to take out Manaphy with like quick shootings and yoga loops, and then do some rapid flows, hope Dusknoir doesn't hit the board. I don't know.
It's one you'd have to play, it sounds like, to have any idea where to go with it, right?
I would probably lose the matchup if I had to guess, but yeah, I don't know.
But thankfully that didn't happen. You won top 8, and then who'd you play? Or what'd you play against in top 8?
In top 8, I play against Joe with Malama.
Okay.
Which was actually funny. In the first game, I won coin flip, went second, and he just went in K pass, and I opened quick ball, dark energy, scoop up net for my hooper, and donked him in the first game.
How many hoopa donks did you get in the tournament?
Just a single one.
Just one. That's a perfect time to get it, though.
Yeah.
So that's a big feels good.
It would be really funny if I donked someone with hooper, and then it actually happened in top 8. That was amazing.
That's got to feel so good. It's like, well, I guess I win. I'll take it.
Yeah.
How'd the rest of the Malamar matchup go? I guess it's between this one and then also finals if you want to get into that one too, but
the second match was much closer. Like, he was trying to keep 4 in-K in play at all times, because otherwise I can just yoga loop the one and then rapid flow the other 2.
Mhm.
And if they manage to keep 4 in-Ks / Malamar in play at all times, it's kind of annoying. And because you can't really just rapid flow, then the 4th one just evolves and knocks you out for 3 prizes. So that's kind of problematic, but I mean, I can still like KO yoga loop like 1, and then I don't KO some other. Also, he didn't play boss, so I could like just like put my Medicham put on like freely, and he couldn't really punish it, which was nice. And
did you know he played rope instead of boss?
I wasn't sure, but I assumed so.
Okay.
So like when I play Malamar, I just don't play like boss. I just hate playing boss in Malamar. It just feels so bad drawing it every time. But against Urshifu specifically, it gives you like it helps for sure, because otherwise the Urshifu player has it kind of easy. But eventually, like, he couldn't get his 4th in-K down, and then I just had like full combo and and won.
So is that combo that primary win condition of yoga loop into rapid flow, take out all the in-Ks?
Yeah, pretty much. And once you get that once, even if I put down in-Ks again, you can just do it again.
It's so good.
Yeah, you usually win afterward. But in the finals, I actually messed up the combo. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but I like after doing like quick shooting, net, quick shooting, I ended up without another drizzle in play. I guess I had like something different in mind, or I don't know, it didn't evolve it, but that gave him an opening, and I actually would have lost if he didn't price his boss, because then he could have KO'd my Urshifu from the bench, but he priced his boss. So that was very fortunate.
We take those.
But then the second game, he had a really slow start, and he basically had no chance in the second game. So like, yeah, he was like bricking for the first 3 turns, and just gave me so much time to set up my whole Inteleon line and everything. And yeah,
I assume by the time you get like quick shootings up, it's like, well, this game is in control for me if you haven't taken a couple knockouts as the Malamar player.
Yeah, like if they didn't even take like 3 prizes, you could even just rapid flow and just give Urshifu to them, and it wouldn't really matter that much. So I guess their main win condition is just like drawing prizes quickly and like keeping all 4 in-K in play. Like Manaphy would also help, I guess, but they didn't play Manaphy because Manaphy in Malamar sucks, obviously. So,
Yeah, I've had people ask me about, because our locals love Rapid Strike Malamar, and they're like, "Do I play a Manaphy?" It's like, well, it might win you one matchup, but isn't it going to lose a bunch of others? Because you draw into the Manaphy, and then you're like, well, I have a dead
playing
card.
against Mew, draw into your Manaphy with the knockup because of that, and yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it would lose way more matchups than it would win for that deck.
Yeah. Usually I would play Manaphy in single price decks, but in Malamar, you just can't play non-rapid strike cards. It's just so bad.
No, like you, I'm so torn on boss because it's like it really helps in certain situations. Like you said, against Urshifu, for example, being able to boss KO an Urshifu V is a realistic play. But also, how many games does boss lose because your second turn you go Cynthia, draw into your boss, and it never leaves your hand? So it's definitely one of those techs that it's so debatable. I don't know. I don't play enough Malamar. I refuse to touch the deck. It feels like solitaire, and I hate it.
Yeah, it's definitely I like just playing it on the ladder just because it's literally a solitaire deck. You're just like it's very chill. You don't really have, and you have to think. You have to know how your deck functions, but you don't have to really consider what your opponent is doing. You just do your thing.
Yep, you're just like, I'm gonna KO the active. How many do I need? Okay, let's draw that many, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit about the deck. So we already learned the backstory to it, and there was some stuff in the matchups, but I want to dive a little deeper into the specifics of the matchups, specifically like the big ones. So let's start with the Mew matchup, because I think this is the most important one. You mentioned the Hoopa. Like you said, like you gave us a spark notes of what I assume could be a 2-hour long explanation of the Mew matchup. But why the heck is Hoopa good in the Mew matchup? That one I don't get, and I want to know.
So there's basically like two main scenarios in the matchup, and like either they put down Oricorio or they don't. And in both scenarios, Hoopa's really good because if they use Oricorio, then you can use Hoopa to do 70 damage to either Meloetta or Oricorio itself. And this then sets up a Yoga Loop play. Then you can, once you do 70 damage to an Oricorio or a Meloetta, you just need to at any point take 2 prizes with a Moltres boss on a Mew or Genesect or whatever, and then you can Yoga Loop the thing with 70 damage, put down Urshifu with an energy or like Raihan to it, and then take your last 3 prizes with Rapid Flow on Oricorio and a Genesect, or usually a Genesect.
Interesting.
And if they don't use Oricorio, then you just use Super then you basically just you can still go for Yoga Loop plays, but you can also just play straight up Hoopa Moltres with like the one Clara and the one Pulpet and just KO Meloetta with Hoopa, KO Mew with Moltres, and yeah, just play the basic dark strategy.
Interesting. So you're going full blown, like, this is one of the things that, and Jake mentioned this on Twitter, and I was like, that sounds good, but also giving a free 2-prizer feels really sketchy. So you are using the Oricorio to the advantage of like, well, I'm still going to hit your Meloetta. And
then never give up 2 prizes because once you use the 2 prizes, you already won.
Okay, so by the point you're using the Yoga Loop into the Rapid Flow, you're like, I just win the game here.
Yeah. So you set up the 70 damage, and then you also have to take 2 prizes at some point. You just boss a Mew with Moltres usually. Like you have like 3 turns to do it, so it's very doable. And then you have 4 prizes. You Yoga Loop the Oricorio Meloetta, and then like usually it's Meloetta, so then you add 3 prizes, and then you just Rapid Flow for game. And you put on the Urshifu the turn you Yoga Loop, so they can't ever boss KO anything. You just you don't use the 2 prizes until you literally just win with them.
And I assume this is where the Zinnias comes into play, because you go like Cynthia to get a massive hand, and you follow that up with like a Zinnia at some point in order to hit all these combo pieces.
Yeah, against Mew, that's basically why the support lineup is so weird. Because the deck is just designed with basically only the Mew matchup in mind. And against Mew, your plan is you Cynthia turn 2, and turn 3 you Zinnia. And then you use like Sonya, usually use Sonya as well to find 2 energy. And sometimes, like usually you also have to use Peonia. But yeah, like you almost always use Cynthia into Zinnia against Mew. And they don't touch your hand ever, so you can just you just build like a 20-card hand with all like your whole combo, and they can't disrupt you, which is like the whole point of the deck.
So that's another thing that, and I tweeted this out, I don't know if you saw it, but looking at the top 8 lists, there were 2 copies of Marnie's in all the top 8 decks. But there were 3 copies of Clara, and there were 3 Sharon's Care, and there's just like no one was playing Marnie that was successful in this tournament, it looked like. Was this
I mean, no deck just plays Marnie at the moment, right? It's like Mew never. It sometimes plays like a Judge or a Marnie, but they very rarely do that. And Malama never plays Marnie. And I mean, Arceus plays like 1 or 2 Marnies. But that's basically the only deck. And against Arceus, even if they Marnie, like against Arceus, you don't play like the whole combo strategy. You just play Urshifu, so that's fine. And against the matchups where you want to have like a 15-card hand with like a very specific 5-card combo, those don't ever play Marnie, at least at the moment. So that was definitely something we assumed going into the tournament. And if we just hit a Mew with a Marnie, that would have been a straight-up auto loss. Impossible to beat. But yeah, we just assumed that no one would do that.
So that was part of the meta call. Like you were well aware that Marnie was not going to be played in this tournament.
Yeah, at least not in the decks that we really don't want to see Marnie.
So okay, that answers a big question, because that feels like one of the things playing the deck, and someone Marnie spams you, and you're like, what do I do here? It feels like Marnie just bodies you.
Yeah, Marnie is definitely annoying. Like even against Arceus decks where you should still be fine because you're Urshifu deck, but there were definitely a lot of games where I just got Marnied against Arceus and either lost or almost lost because of that. So that's definitely a big weak point of the deck.
So how about the Arceus? Let's just go with the basic Arceus Inteleon, because I think that would be the scariest for this deck. I don't even know if that's true. Are there any Arceus decks that you don't want to see?
I played against one Arceus Urshifu, and that was kind of scary because it could just rapid flow my results. Yeah, that was definitely the scariest. Arceus Inteleon is, I mean, it's the best Arceus deck, just which makes it kind of scary because they always have whatever they want to do. But yeah, as overall, it's usually fine. It's like if they have the Dance Pass, if they don't attach a big jump to it, you can just Yoga Loop it, like with Quick Shooting, Net, Quick Shooting, Yoga Loop, and then get a free Gale Frost onto the Arceus. And even if they play big jump, they usually don't attach the big jump. They usually don't play Mana Fee, so you can just Rapid Flow and then go Gale Frost 2 times. So if you draw reasonably well, you should usually always beat Arceus decks.
So is Yoga Loop one of the like biggest strategies of this deck? Because I was expecting you to say, oh, you just rapid flow the Dunsparce, but you're saying, oh, setting up a Yoga Loop play is one of the best things to do. So like, are you Yoga Looping in like almost every matchup?
But if you Yoga Loop it, they can't just Clara it back immediately or something, which is just nice. And yeah, Yoga Loop is definitely like one of the most important attacks on the deck. Without Medicham, it wouldn't work. It's like you wouldn't beat Mew, you wouldn't beat Malama probably. Against Arceus, you don't need it. I actually didn't end up using it that much against the Arceus matchups, but I probably should have used it more. Yeah, like Medicham is definitely the MVP of the deck, like one of the MVPs.
Awesome. That's super good to hear, because that feels like a strategy that I need to think about. Were there any other matches? It sounds like everything else you've went through was just like, well, you can just kind of rapid flow and be an Urshifu deck against something like Single Strike, which is apparently still a deck somehow, or the Melanie deck.
Yeah, like most matchups were either just Arceus and you just like Rapid Flow once, Gale Frost twice, or maybe like Yoga Loop. Then, well, there's Gengar. It's basically also just like you attack with Urshifu if you can. Single price matchups are also like you do like Yoga Loop or Rapid Flow, whatever. So like the Urshifu is just really good in the meta game against anything that's not Mew. So like the other matchups were just like Urshifu usually carries those, and I didn't really use like the darkness Pokemon much outside of like Mew or Malama.
So you're not dropping the Moltres for the big like 220 or 270 turns. It's literally there for the Mew matchup and just be like, well, I'm going to Oko you or I'm going to Gale Thrust KO your Dark or Fighting Weak thing.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. Like against decks with Mani, it's just almost impossible to use the Moltres because they just Mani you, and then you don't play that many energies or that many outs to Moltres even. So yeah, the whole darkness package is pretty reliant on just like building a hand and like getting like Sonia for 2 energies, and then next turn maybe you use those energies, or like even 2 turns later. In regular matchups, it doesn't really have much use. Like the Hooper can be nice sometimes, but also not really.
So moving forward, EUIC is coming up. Is this a deck that like is a strong consideration for you, or should people consider it, or was this hey, this is really strong in the meta and we built it specifically for this meta and now things are changing?
Like I'm not sure. And it's still good against like Arceus decks and most things, but like if people let you go first, that's kind of a problem in general. If maybe some Malama players start playing the Manafi, even though it's not really good in Malama, then it's still fine, but it makes the matchup definitely harder. And if like the single price decks play Manafi, then it just makes you have to draw better. And yeah, in this tournament it was really nice, like getting to go second. People don't really have anything against you in the deck, so even if you draw suboptimally, you're oftentimes fine. But it would definitely get harder at EYC now, and the deck isn't the most consistent. So like bad starts, if they get punished like regularly, that would definitely be a problem. Also, you might just run into like new players with Mani now, which would be like you basically can't beat that. Or even like an Arceus Intellion player with Manaphy would also be like if you like brick for like 1 or 2 turns against Arceus with Manaphy, you probably also lose. It's I'm not sure. I think the deck's still fine. It's a strong deck, but I don't know if I would still play it at future tournaments.
There's one card that I haven't heard you mention once, and it feels like it sticks out in the list. Gormandi's Snorlax. How did it find its way in the list, and was it actually useful?
And Snorlax is like the one of the best cards just in general for setup. If you don't want to put a Crobat or something at 2 price in play, Snorlax it just does the job. I think like the main purpose of it to make it easier to use Peonia, because like you can't really you of course can't play Draw Supporter and a Peonia, but sometimes you also need to draw cards while using Peonia, especially against Mew. So the Snorlax is kind of there for that. Also, I mean, it lets you draw cards out of a quick ball, and I think it's basically our research kind of. But it's just like it's a different kind of draw supporter. It just makes the deck a bit more consistent. I really like playing Snorlax in almost any deck which just doesn't want to attack immediately from turn 1 or 2. It's just a good card.
So where would you put Snorlax? Because I think you're one of the first people I've heard really talk about how good Snorlax is, which makes sense. When that set came out, I was like, this is like the first or second best card in the deck, because it's just like, it's ridiculous, right? But like, can you sell us like all the listeners on Snorlax a bit, like should this be played in more decks, or is this really just like, well, my deck wants to make comebacks and make these plays, so that's why we had the Snorlax in there?
If you play a deck which wants to attack turn 2, like for damage, then you probably don't want Snorlax. I mean, I could see playing a Snorlax and Arceus or something, wouldn't be the worst thing, but you're probably fine without it. But in Urshifu, it fits kind of well. It's not like mandatory inclusion. You could cut it. Compared to like most other cards, it's like less important, but it's just really nice to have, and yeah, it can just save you from bricking, and yeah, that's certainly valuable.
One of my mods keeps trying to convince me that Snorlax is broken in single strike. Do you think this is one of those situations where, like, well, you usually don't attack on turn 1? Correction, you never attack on turn 1 with that deck. Is that the type of deck that you would see Snorlax? I just want to see if you can give him a bone of like, yes, you're doing the right thing, maybe.
Snorlax is best in decks where you play nets, I think, because you kind of want to be able to get him out of play. But in general, I think one-pricer decks, especially those with nets, they usually benefit from Snorlax because they don't need to attack immediately, and they can really benefit from just like drawing some more cards. In single strike, I don't really like playing non-single strike cards. Like even like the liberal is kind of sus because you also have to play like then balloons and everything with it because you can't attach single strike energies to it, and then you can. I think there's actually a lot of games where like a single strike player with a Bibarel or something can just get decked out by a boss Bibarel, especially like or boss tool scrapper, and they just literally just can't get it out of the active ever. So
maybe not in single strike. All right, I will relay that message.
Maybe not. It depends on the list. Like if people can just like quick shooting you forever while the Snorlax sits there in the active, then you probably shouldn't play it.
Are there any other pieces of this list that you feel like, hey, this was really good and I want to sell people on it? Or is everything else just like, yeah, it's fine?
I think the list was like really good. I would maybe change one card at most, but other than that, like everything has its purpose. Like I guess the Snorlax is probably like the most cuttable of the Pokemon. Everything else you kind of need for matchups, but Snorlax is still nice, and like all the trainers you also kind of need, and the energies you also need. It's I think it's difficult to change the list.
I've got two more. As you were mentioning the trainers, it reminded me of Birdkeeper. Why is there Birdkeeper in the list?
Birdkeeper, I guess Birdkeeper is like the one supporter which doesn't have a specific purpose in the deck, but it's just a really good Urshifu card. It's when you're playing like against Arceus and everything, you're playing a Urshifu deck. It's a bit worse than a regular Urshifu deck, but it gets the job done, and that's mostly because of just Birdkeeper. It's like without Birdkeeper, you wouldn't really be able to Gale Thrust back to back. I give the one tower, which is really important, but yeah, Birdkeeper just giving you like the free Gale Thrust and also like being able to recover from Paw Pad, and it's like it's a draw supporter which doesn't have like a condition, unlike Xenia and Cynthia. Like Birdkeeper 100% belongs into the deck, I think. Yeah, it's just really good with Urshifu in general. It's like all the Urshifu decks ever, they all love Birdkeeper, and yeah, this one is not different.
And my last question is on a card not in the deck. And I think you've probably been asked this before, or you've heard people ask this on Pedro or Tord's stream, but it seems like the 61st card in everyone's mind is Escape Rope. So okay, for those who are listening instead of watching on YouTube or Twitch, the look on Robin's face tells me that is not the 61st card.
So that's wasn't even a consideration ever, I think.
So why not? Why is Escape Rope not good in this list?
I don't know why would you need it?
Okay, so I'll try and defend Escape Rope real quick. So some of the reasons why I think Escape Rope could be good in here is you don't have to boss, right? So you hit the Meloetta for 70. You can Escape Rope instead of boss, so you KO one of the other two prizers. Another big reason is you have that massive hand. A Mew gives you a single prizer you don't want to hit. Although you're probably going to say this doesn't matter now that I've heard the Mew matchup, but Hoopa Moltres, right? They give you a single prizer and it becomes really awkward. So Rope becomes a pseudo boss the same turn you Clara, for example. So are you just listening to that and you're like, no, we don't need that?
I mean, I'm sure if you played a lot of games, there would definitely be situations where Escape Rope comes up. I mean, it's a good card, right? It could help with like Cheryl plays, because right now if you want to like Cheryl and retreat in the same turn, you have to have the tower. So Escape Rope would be like a second out for that, but don't usually need it. And against Mew, they usually have just a second one prizer that they will promote over two prizer, so I don't think it really does the job there. And I know there's just so many cards that I think you would rather, like, the deck already has enough options. It's pretty strong. It has basically what it needs to beat the matchups. So if you want to add something, I would just put in a consistency card instead of another option for like random situations.
Okay, that makes sense. So everyone listening, cut the Escape Rope and or stop going into people's streams and asking why they're an Escape Rope in the list, because I think Robin put it up succinctly there.
If you want to add another card, like my next card would definitely be Brawly, just like for the setup. Because
I didn't think that was coming at all.
like you need Keep Calling, and Brawly would just be like if you whiff the turn on Keep Calling or have to go first, you still need to keep calling on the second turn usually, but if you had a Brawly in your deck, you could just Drizzle for the Brawly instead, which is a bit easier than getting Sobble into active and attaching an energy. So that would be a really nice. Also, it's just really good to open with if you go second as well. So that would be my next card to add into the deck.
So how often, to go off that, the Sonya, was the Sonya really just like a double energy search most of the time?
Yeah, pretty much. But I also used it to get to Pokemon a decent amount of times.
But I guess Brawler would just be better.
Matchup, like, against Mew, you usually like use Sonya to get energy and use like Drizzle or Intellion for Quick Ball to get your Moltres and Hoopa. But in other matchups, you just sometimes randomly draw the Sonya and then just use it. But yeah, if Lady was still in format, then we might play that over Sonya.
The amount of cards that you're saying that I'm just like, I am clearly too many steps below as a deck builder to have even thought about these options.
But it's nice that Sonya can get Pokemon as well, but it's mainly for the energies.
All right, here's another. Would Sonya have been better if it was still Roxanne's Research? If you could get one Pokemon and one energy instead, or was that never something that would have come up?
In that, it's definitely annoying that you can't just combine energies in Pokemon with Sonya. That hasn't annoyed me ever since Sonya, ever since Rebel Clash. It's literally it's just so annoying. But in this deck, it doesn't matter that much because usually, you're fine with taking either. But in general, yeah, it would be much nicer if you could just combine those two, for sure.
So we've got, it looks like 2 questions from Twitch chat. Blaine asks, you've already kind of mentioned it, but if you want to elaborate a little bit, Blaine asks, Robin, why so many ties?
Yeah, I talked about it earlier, right? It's just a combination of many things, like the deck being slow, me not being as fast as I should be, my opponents not being as fast as they maybe should be. It's yeah. It's I guess partly the deck's fault, but also partly my fault.
For anyone who's going to Indy or EUIC as your first regional or I guess international of the year, that's a very realistic thing, is these ties. Because if you don't 2-0 each other, then it gets a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Dunsparce OP asks, predictions for EUIC. So EUIC is in the weird spot, of course, where a lot of people didn't get in. I assume you got in?
Yeah, I did.
Cool.
Luckily.
Do you have any predictions for EUIC? Is it still going to be Mew's world that we're all living in? Or are we going to go elsewhere?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I could see it like suddenly being like an 8 Mew or like 7 Mews in top 8. It could happen, I think. But it could also just be a lot of Arceus, maybe some. I think there's also like other decks out there that could be good. I don't think we've seen everything yet. Also, I don't know. Like anything could happen, really. It depends on what the top players decide to play, I guess.
So you think there's still room for innovations in this format?
Yeah, I think so. I think the format's actually like pretty interesting. There's a lot of, especially with the Intelligent Engine, you can play so much stuff.
I love
Also, you can counter the Intelligent Engine. I think there's a lot of like options and cool decks in the format. I mean, it could be just like a Mew sweep, but I think it could also just continue like it is right now, with like, I don't know, 1 or 2 Mews in top 8, and then the rest being like some random decks. Anything is possible, really.
This was a question we had last week that we attempted to answer, but I think you're the person I want to hear the answer from. Professor Poke had asked, do we think Inteleon engines, and you mentioning Inteleon reminded me of this, do you think Inteleon engines are going to go more towards Robin's style of list, which was a bunch of one-ofs, the Peonia, the Palpad, as opposed to the current ones we're seeing, which are still like 2 of all the major supporters and the research and the Marnies and stuff like that? So do you think, was it specific for your deck and it's not going to work elsewhere, or do you think this is the future of Inteleon engines?
Like, I think in general, it doesn't really make sense if people play like Inteleon decks and they play like, I don't know, free research, free money or whatever. I mean, why would you do it if you can just like play slightly different supporters that kind of do the same thing, but they are sometimes just better, and that you can just get whenever you can just get the right supporter for the situation instead of having like 3 options. Because like Drizzer just lets you choose, so why not just like play different options?
I love it. Last time you were on, you talked a lot about how just drawing cards off the top can be so powerful in specific situations. I'm pretty sure we talked specifically about Erica's Hospitality because that was still standard at that point. But I assume Zinnia's has that same feeling of like, sometimes you just want to draw cards and keep stuff in your hand.
Yeah, I wish Erica was still in format, because Zinnia's discard 2 is kind of rough for most decks, but it's still a good card. And like just discard 2 and draw like 5-6 against most decks is still a good effect. But yeah, Erica was like on another level.
Erica was a fun card. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I played it in Players Cup 4 in Rowlet, Alolan Executor, Mewtwo, the Relish, the Grass Box. And it was just like, it was so powerful in some situations because you're just like, I've got Malolana for next turn. I don't want to research this hand. So I'm just going to draw a bunch of cards and set up all the options in the world. That was a fun card.
I think Erica would be like a one of staple, like no questions asked in Intelligent decks right now.
Really?
Like you could always just like, why would you not play one Erica in your Inteleon deck right now? It just would be so good.
I love this because every time I bring up Zinnia in a deck, people are like, no, that thing sucks. Even an Inteleon deck. And you're like, Erica, which is...
Yeah, Zinnia is definitely much more sus. Like Zinnia is harder to use than Erica, but Erica would be really good in Inteleon decks in general. Zinnia is really good in like the Urshifu deck, and I think she's probably a bit underplayed, but I admit that Zinnia is not the best supporter ever. It's fine.
So while I've got you, can I also ask you about Ultra Ball then? Just like in general as a card. Is it just like Zinnia where it's incredibly powerful, but for the most part, the discard effect is not optimal for a lot of decks because there's so many good cards in format that you don't want to discard? Like, why aren't we seeing more Ultra Ball?
Ultra Ball is just very deck specific right now. Some decks, of course, just want to play for sure. And most Inteleon decks, it's not that good in, I think.
That makes sense.
Like you have Incense, you have Level Ball, you have Quick Ball. They are just most of the time better than Ultra Ball.
And last question before I let you go. Most important question. If there was not a limit of 4 cards, how many Sobbles would you play in your deck?
Probably like 6, 7, or 8. I'm not sure. Definitely more than 4. Like at least 6, possibly more.
So it's that good. Keep calling is
Yeah,
that important.
Yeah, we've even considered playing the grass thing, which also has the attack for search 3 Pokemon.
The Gossifleur.
Because it can also evolve into a thing which into the Eldegoss, which gets you energies. But the problem with that card is that it only had 50 HP, like the little guy. So against Mew, you couldn't really use it because it would always just get KO'd immediately by Ulcurious attack. So that was a bit unfortunate. But yeah, like just keep calling, or the keep calling equivalent attack is so important for the deck.
Love to hear it. I just love keep calling. It's one of my favorite attacks right now. Robin, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to hear more of you, where can they find you?
I sometimes write articles on limitless.t3d.com. I probably will write an article about the tournament and the deck. So like, I don't know, you might see that like sometime next week. Yeah.
I'm excited. I'd love to read it. And you're not going to mention it, so I will mention it. Limitless has a Patreon page. If you like to check results, get deck lists, you enjoy the online tournaments, please go support them. I am a Patreon. I put my money where my mouth is. Anyone else who enjoys any of these amenities, please go give Limitless some money on Patreon for sure. You got to remember to sell it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate anyone who does that.
And of course, myself, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at mellow_magikarp. This was a bonus episode, so we'll still have one coming to you on this upcoming Tuesday as well, with a very special guest who I'm hoping will introduce a lot of you to someone that you may not know yet. And this has been another episode of the Lake of Rage podcast. We'll catch you all next week.